start that live stream right now. Microphone all turned on and live.
Right, you want to go ahead and push that button?
All is set.
The orange button, the one that's blinking.
Good.
And then you'll see the numbers, like the seconds start to
That's good.
go up.
All right. Mr. Mayor, please call roll.
Mr. Rivers?
Here.
Ms. Knapp?
Here.
Mr. Antrim?
Here.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
For our agenda this evening, I believe we have a few guests here. So in regards to agenda change, I would like to, we have our 6 p.m. presentation. We also have Mr. Bragg from Ohio State here with us. So I'd like to move park report up after our 6 o'clock presentation and then have our executive session follow.
If everyone is in agreement with that, we have 2 representatives from Triad. We have Zach Price and Megan Stewart, who are here to present the latest rendition of the Township Hall renovations. Could you cue those up, Mr. Beard? And that's actually his name, not just a nickname. Or descriptive nickname, I should say.
We also have printed copies.
Oh, thank you, Ms. Stewart.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Megan Stewart. I am an architect and project manager with Triad Architects in Columbus, and I'm here with my colleague, Zach Price. As you see in front of you, this is phase 1 of the planning and schematic design project, where we looked at adding a couple of offices in the garage area and also renovating the reception area. So if you advance to page number 3, which I think you're at. So that is the existing building, and as you see, we're focusing on the garage and the reception area. So if you get your bearings, we're kind of in that large meeting room. Could you see? Please. Page number 4. So this is a zoomed in version of the garage area and the reception area. So we'll start with the reception area. We're proposing that we add a wall with a transaction window and a door to secure the reception area, and also provide a little more space for waiting. Currently, there is limited space kind of in that area. It's a little cramped. And then as you move towards the garage area, we would actually raise the floor a little bit, because as you know, as you walk into the garage, it's a step down to that garage level. So we'll build up the floor and then provide 2 office spaces. One office that is completely enclosed, and then also there is access and a stair back down to that garage level to get to a now reduced mechanical area. So in the garage currently there are electrical panels that we're not going to move, so we're creating a smaller mechanical area. And as you see where on the left-hand side of kind of that garage area where the garage doors would have been, we are going to replace them with windows and a new door to get into the mechanical area. If you go to the next sheet, page number 5, that is just as if you took a mirror and looked at the ceiling. Those are the new lights that we're going to place surface mount to the existing ceiling. And then page number 6. The first drawing is of the exterior garage. So you can see, so if you can imagine what that garage facade looks like, there's a door, a single door to get in, and then 3 large garage door openings. The 3 large garage doors would be removed. And because we are raising the floor about 1.5 feet, we do need to provide some sort of solid wall before we get to a window section. And the look and feel of that would match the existing cedar siding that's there now. And so there are windows to those offices. And this is the first phase of this project. So these are preliminary. This is a placeholder of what the windows could look like. We can continue through the design process and kind of change what that looks like. Any questions thus far? Okay, the next on that sheet is if you took a saw and cut the building kind of down the middle, you can see the relationship of the new reception area with the wall that's kind of separating reception from waiting. And then there are 2 adjacent offices, which would be in the garage area. And then you can see there's a step down. So again, illustrating that we're building up that floor for the new offices. Okay, page number 7. This is as if this first image, you have walked through the vestibule and you're now looking at the transaction window for the receptionist. It will be a sliding glass window with a counter height. And then there will be beside that a door with some glass in it to access into the rest of the space. And the other cross section on page number 7 is as if you cut through the garage and you're looking again at the office in the garage. And this is just showing that grade change where we're taking you from the existing garage level up to the first floor level. So there will be some construction to get to level it out. There's also an existing trench drain in the garage, which we will need to remove the grate that's there and then infill it so that we don't have plumbing there anymore.
And just for the board's knowledge, if you notice the floor slopes towards the drain, so it's higher in the back of the garage, lower at the garage door area. So it's not to catch waters coming from outdoors into the garage. It's for cleaning of trucks while they're inside the garage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but because there will no longer be trucks inside of the garage, we don't need the drain. Okay, page number 8. This is a temporary look during construction. As the reception area is under construction, we're suggesting that you could turn that garage area into a temporary reception area and entrance, and essentially take the existing furniture that you have in the reception area now and just relocate it to the garage. We will need to make a modification to the door that you see on the left-hand side in that garage area. Right now, currently, the door is swinging into the garage. We'll need to reverse that swing and actually make the door a little larger to meet our egress requirements for code. We are still going to provide a wall that separates the mechanical area from that temporary office space. Any questions on that?
If the board recalls, in the initial edification of this conceptual design, there was a walkway during this temporary phase that provided ramping up the stairs. Through research, our fine friends at Triad were able to note that that's not necessary.
Correct. If there is someone from the public that needs an accessible means of egress, that can be provided via the entry on this side of the building and the ramp that's internal to the building.
So there were some alternative access points that we can utilize to accommodate.
Okay, page number 9. This is looking at the garage, the front of the garage elevation during that construction and showing that during the temporary use of the garage. So the garage doors will stay during the temporary use. We will need to modify that single door and make it a little larger and change the swing. And page number 10 is we were asked to provide an opinion of probable cost for the construction of the waiting area and the garage area. And that figure is there. And if you go to page 11, we were also asked, what if we didn't, we kept the garage as is, as it's functioning right now as a garage and storage area, and we provided, we still did the reception area construction, but then provided an addition somewhere off of the building to accommodate those 2 extra offices. And this is roughly the comparison, mostly showing you that you are going to save money if you do the construction in the garage.
So it's a difference of $202,000 versus $316,000?
Correct. Yes. And the last sheet is our engineering consultants provided a scope write-up of the requirements and the costing for the additional mechanical, electrical scope that would be for the renovation project. And those numbers that are down at the bottom of the cost estimate are included in the previous 2 estimates.
Was there any sort of cost estimates if we just tore down the garage and built a new addition on?
Defer to Zach.
Thanks. Again, my name's Zach Price. We did not look at that specifically. However, you'd probably go with the new construction cost and then probably add some demolition cost to it as well, which wouldn't be significantly more. But you could build a new addition in place of that garage. I think the challenge that you might have with that is you've got a significant amount of electric service in that garage, which could become more costly than it would be worth to proceed that route. So.
What's the difference then between those 2 quotes? One is the regular renovation, and then the second one.
I must have misunderstood also. I
Yeah,
thought the
I thought it was-
316 was if you wiped it out and built it all new, and the 202 was renovating the existing.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, so each cost estimate includes the cost for the renovation of the existing reception area. And then in addition to that, there's the cost to add the additional office space. So one option is you can add that additional office space within the existing garage space. And then the second option was looking at if you take that exact same square footage of office space that you would be putting into the garage and build it as an addition onto this building in a different location.
But leaving the garage as is?
Correct.
Okay, so then that would be $316,000 approximately, plus the cost of the demolition if we were to demolish the garage and put the offices there.
Correct.
Well, I thought you said if it was an addition to another part of the building.
We didn't look at a specific location for an addition. There's, I think,
Yeah, it could be anywhere.
right.
But this would be the basic cost of that addition, regardless of mostly where it was placed.
Yes, and depending on where it's placed, of course, it could cost slightly more or less, and that's why we have some contingency numbers in here. So you'll see, for example, a 10% design contingency there. That is for things that, as we were to proceed through the next steps of the design of this project, you know, depending on how that proceeds with each option, there are things that will come up. You know, if you're depending on where you were to put an addition, it may cost more or less. So, as we proceed through the design process, we like to hold that design contingency, but we typically, as we get closer to bidding the project, would reduce that contingency because the further we proceed with the project, the sharper we're able to, you know, our pencils get with figuring out, looking at these costs.
So it's about 56% more per cost if we were to, versus reconstructing and renovating the current garage versus building a new addition.
Correct.
Within the garage, the two office spaces are around 200 square feet each, so it's a net about 400 square feet, minus not including the waiting room. It looks like one office is 235, the other one's 196.
Plus the
Yes.
circulation, that hallway area. That's what we were back on.
Wait, what is that again? It's
The new office space includes what's labeled on the schematic design floor plan there is office number 137, office room number 138, and then hall 142. So you have two new offices and then a hall along with a little kind of vestibule that goes out to the mechanical space, which serves as an additional egress point and access to the mechanical space.
But would the addition, the proposed addition, be larger than the proposed renovation?
No, we looked at this exact same square
So it's the
footage.
same square footage, okay.
So you have on that cost, page 11 there, actually both page 10 and 11, whether it's the line item, which is office, garage area, and temporary entry, or on page 11, it's labeled just office addition. See the quantity is 565 square feet.
That's what I thought, they're the same size.
Yes.
On page 10, I have some questions about the cost. There's I understand design contingency. Could you explain the prevailing wage multiplier and also the non-construction soft costs?
Sure. So prevailing wage is just the cost estimates at this phase. We do it says the unit there square foot. So we're using a cost per square foot for these costs. And that's based on past, historical data we have, recent similar projects that we've bid, and then a database that we use. Most of the projects, if you look at the big database, and most projects aren't using prevailing wage rates. So most municipalities, if you are using prevailing wage rates, we typically see about a 35% increase.
So that's what would apply to this for us.
Yeah. Yes.
That 51,000.
Unless you're able to go non-prevailing wage, which I don't believe you are.
And what's the soft construction cost?
Soft costs are typically your architecture, engineering fees, permitting, printing.
So the three-phase proposal you gave us, is that part of the soft cost? Or is that
I believe that number there is what is left on the contract that was approved for the renovation of the garage area. Now, you'll see on the next page it's slightly higher because if you are going to do an addition, there's a considerable amount of additional design work there. So there's additional structural work, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and life safety.
when this project started, it was very important to do something with the front office to make it more secure and so on. And in fact, I was asked to appropriate around $40,000 or $50,000 for that project. And then all of a sudden, somebody had the idea of adding some offices in the garage. So it's kind of gotten a life of its own. And I'm not even sure what those offices are going to be for. So I'm wondering what the cost would be if all we did was the renovation of the front office, which is what the original idea was in the first place.
Well, that's not, I don't believe that's the trustee's intent to, and this is our plan, and we've decided, is that correct, that we are renovating the garage and
What?
the garage and the other
I'm just
space?
asking,
I'd like to move forward on this. I think I'm ready to go.
So you also don't have a lot of experience yet as far as everything that this township hall does and stores. And been very short of space for quite a long time. So just like they did with the pool, they didn't build it big enough and caused quite a headache for everybody. They ended up adding another pool. You might as well do it right the first time. I'd like to see it even be bigger, but I think I'm good with working with this right now.
Who's gonna be using these offices, or what's the purpose of the offices?
I think that has yet to be determined.
Do you think that's an important piece before we decide if this is necessary or not?
Well, these offices are larger than the existing offices within the township building, so I believe that they would be suitable for any use by any employee or elected official or other staff
It'd be
members.
nice to get Leanne out of the closet, don't you think?
Well, no, but I think as far as having an assessment of the building and the space that we have now, would be a good thing to see what space we have and if we can better make use of that before we start adding more office space.
We definitely need more office space. As you know, Mr. Mayor kicked the trustees out of his office, the office that we shared together within weeks of his arrival. So the trustees have absolutely no office to meet anybody in, and that's pretty embarrassing. So I know that one of these offices at some point will be the trustees' office to use, as they should have.
So if we're looking to create space for the trustees, wouldn't it be good to have an assessment of kind of current space we have now and see if maybe we could use a little bit wiser, there's a better way to go about looking at our current structure and make some changes?
Like, what would that be? What do we need that I'm missing here?
I'm not someone who's gonna come and do an assessment, I'm saying a professional that can look at the current structure of the building. I mean, as far as the overall, the reception area, I mean, that's long overdue and is needed. I'm in favor of that, but I think for the township hall as a whole, it'd be wise to take an overall look at it. If we're gonna put this much money in the township hall, I think instead of trying to piecemeal something together, we should have the whole thing assessed.
So we should, what advantage would that, are you planning on building a new township hall for millions of
I'm
dollars?
just saying, we have a lot of space here. I'm not sure if it's being, right now, that we're using it to the best of its ability.
I think with this addition, we'll be able to use it to the
Yes,
best of our
exactly.
ability.
And the changes to the front office are long overdue, and part of my idea was that we were going to, part of the concept of renovating the garage was the ladies that work in the front area could move out to the garage and work out there while the renovations were being done. So that was kind of a two-for. Otherwise, they were gonna have to set up offices somewhere back here, and that was very inconvenient, so that's part of it. I'm ready to move forward on this.
so I'm just asking a
You've done a
financial,
great job.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I was just asking a financial question because I know I'm going to get questions from the public. What would it cost if we just did the front office renovation and not include the garage? There's some figures here that look like 43,810 plus.
Okay, the trustees are the ones that make the decision here, Mr. Mayor, and I'm ready to
No,
move forward on this.
I think that'd be a helpful piece of information.
Well, I'm ready to move forward on this project. Trustee Trano,
Yes, I'm ready.
is there a resolution?
There is a resolution in the template on page
Provide
9.
that information to me at some point. Thank you.
So, and how many changes are you making? 2 changes? You said to the door. Is that the only one? You're making the door wider and it's gonna swing outward, is that it? Okay. So, do we need to indicate that in the resolution?
No, that's, the resolution is to accept the plan and the schematic design that's presented and authorize Triad to move forward with phase 2 of the design plan, which would be to add more meat to the bones that we have currently.
And when would this go out to bid then?
It would take some time to complete the actual design, make sure that everybody is in agreement with the type of windows, any other changes to the facade, any lighting, those types of things. Incorporate those into the design, the development of the design specs. So Zach, what would be your best guess? Mr. Price?
Well, we probably would not recommend going out to bid before the end of the year. That's generally because the earlier in the beginning of the year that you go out to bid, you tend to get better pricing. You get more interest from contractors at the beginning of the year when they're starting their fiscal year and trying to keep their crews busy as the weather gets better. And then, between now and the end of the year, as Lee said, we need to finalize the design and bid documents. You have to approve those. There's a public bid process to go through.
I think we're very concerned with the safety of the employees, so I think we'd like to get on it as soon as possible. We feel that it's unsafe and also extremely unproductive. If you've been back there,
Yes.
it's quite the disruption, and it's very stressful for the employees, and it's very open, and it's just not conducive to working, I don't think.
Wouldn't the timing, as this is interior work, be a little bit more conducive to harsher weather?
It is. You still are going through the bidding process with contractors and competing with the holidays and deer
I'm not sure if it
season.
was you I talked to or another architect, but I thought they made a comment that they actually look for work like this in the winter where they'd be working inside the offices. Was that you or?
Some of them do. I don't recall that, but as we do proceed through design, we call contractors to encourage them to look at the project and bid on it.
That would make sense though, because there's lots of outdoor construction
Mhm.
for the
But
months and months.
as
think
far
we'd
as
like to
our work-
expedite it.
As far as our work, we're ready to proceed as soon as we have to go ahead.
I think a lot of us have a lot of pride in this building and how far it's come over the years. It really represents Orange Township, so I'm glad to be able to add on to it. And it's probably not even 20% of what a new township hall would cost. I imagine that would be well over $1 million plus.
Oh, millions, several
Yeah.
millions, and it's a very beautiful environment. I get so many compliments
Right.
on this facility. I make a motion to accept the Orange Township Hall renovation planning and schematic design and authorize Triad Architects to move forward with phase 2 of the design planning process.
Second?
Ms. Knapp,
Yes?
Ms. Franson,
Yes.
Mr. Rivers,
I would like to see an assessment of the entire township hall before we put this kind of money into it, so I'm a no.
Employee safety and productivity first.
Great, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I believe we have another guest with us here this evening, and I'm actually going to turn it over to Mr. Cohen to give the introduction.
Well, thank you. Our bonds have created some problems this year. Contacted Eugene Ray at Ohio State University to come assess him, which he happily he did. And I think tonight he just wants to talk about the bonds and the situation. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, so my name is Eugene Bragg. I am a program director with Ohio State University Extension, which really just means I'm a statewide specialist. The full title is Program Director for Aquatic Ecosystems Extension, which I guess is a fancy title that means I'm the state's pond specialist. I drive around and help folks manage their water and their fish. So a pond, to be functional as a pond, a body of water really should maintain a certain degree of depth. It is kind of a beginning point for how your pond should function. Right? So a certain volume, a depth will allow for a certain volume of storage of water, which is important if we're talking, for example, about stormwater retention. And it will also have a certain reservoir of oxygen, dissolved oxygen in the water column, which functions as important habitat if it's important to sustain something like a fishery in a pond. Right? So you need a certain volume of water to maintain function as a pond. And in general, if we're talking about only stormwater retention functions, the state's advice is usually that about 25% of a pond be 6 to 8 feet deep or so. If we're talking about functioning as habitat for something like a fish, at least through most of the state, including where we happen to be right now, the pond should be 25% 8 feet deep or better. Right? So there's some, of course, as a pond ages, it accumulates sediment and organic material over time. And so as you're filling in the basin of that pond, you're losing depth and functionally losing volume and functionally losing the function of the pond as a pond. So one of the ways that you can slow the aging process is with an aeration system. And the aeration system, I'm not talking about a fountain, which has a certain aesthetic, but is a very minimally useful thing regarding the aging of a pond. To slow the aging process when I'm talking about aeration, I'm talking about blowing bubbles from deep water, assuming you have deep water, right? And if you have a certain depth of water, you put these structures are called diffusers. You put diffusers along the bottom of a pond. Bubbles come out of the diffusers, and as they move towards the surface of the pond, the bubbles come out, they kind of form a cone. So if you have a certain amount of depth, you have few diffusers that interact at the surface and actually can be expected to circulate water effectively. If you don't have that depth, the bubbles don't have enough space, room to spread out. Right? So point diffusers have much, much less utility in a very shallow pond. I bring this up because when I was on North Orange Pond, there are 2 ponds there in series, right? And if you look at the stormwater management guide, there are certain prescriptions regarding how to manage ponds effectively. And I actually like that 2 pond in series idea. Often when you have a situation like that, you can allow that north pond to function as, in essence, a settling basin, what might be called a forebay, right? So as water is flowing into the system, it slows down when it hits that first pond. It drops its load of problematic things like dirt and nutrients and potentially toxic substances. As it moves down to the lower pond, that water is in essence cleaner. Those problems have largely been removed. So that pond that's at the lower portion of the watershed is maintaining its function for longer. Right? But that means that the upper pond requires more maintenance. And the upper pond is very, very shallow there. You have diffuser aerators out there. I measured oxygen surface to bottom. The oxygen and temperature was pretty uniform surface to bottom in both of those ponds. I don't know if that's because your aerators are being efficient, although I doubt they are because they're so very shallow. What I really suspect is that the ponds are too shallow to function like a pond should, and they don't stratify at all. So if you want to maintain those ponds as ponds, really you should think about dredging to regain the depth, especially on the lower pond. And if you want to maintain the upper pond as a settling basin, there you'd manage it a little bit differently. And I believe that pond is supposed to be managed as a fishery as well, correct? So I know it's popular fish. So that looks to me like the lesser of your problems. It doesn't quite have the depth it should. I'd rather fix that before it becomes extremely problematic. And especially because as you accumulate more silt, more sediment in the basin, it becomes increasingly more expensive because there's a larger volume of material that needs to be moved. The Township Hall Pond is an altogether different story, right? So when I talk about depth, that also interacts with the slope of the shoreline. And ideally, a pond that's functioning as a managed pond, as quality habitat, will have a shoreline that is what we call a 3-to-1 ratio. So as you step out 3 feet from the shore, you're moving down about a foot in depth. That's a rather steep slope. Part of the function of that is to put the bottom out of reach of the sun more quickly so that as plants grow in the pond, which they will, the plants benefit the pond rather than becoming a weed issue, right? Well, in the Township Hall Pond, there is no appreciable slope. I did not put a boat on that pond because the filamentous green algae that's on the pond is so thick that I didn't think we could push a boat through it. Now, the filamentous green algae is a nuisance, but essentially harmless, right? It makes for very bad habitat when we're talking about trying to maintain a fishery. What's more concerning is the open water around the filamentous green algae is extremely bright green, and I'm almost positive, as positive as I can be without looking under a microscope, that what's going on there is a bloom of an organism called microcystis, which is one of the so-called blue-green algae, which technically aren't true algae at all. They're technically a large group of organisms called cyanobacteria. And the problem with microcystis is it's potentially very, very toxic, right? It's especially notorious for producing a very potent nerve toxin. And there are different cogeners of this nerve toxin. Some of them are less harmful than others, but some of them are some of the most toxic substances that we know. Right? So that pond really, to regain the function of the pond here on this site, would take a pretty extreme effort, I think, to dredge it to regain function as a pond. That said, an alternative, the green stuff, all the stuff that's living in a pond, is going to be competing for space, it's going to be competing for light, it's going to be competing for nutrients. You know this, you can shape the competition to go in a direction you'd like. So a much more affordable alternative would be to sacrifice this pond so it's no longer a pond and instead plant it very aggressively with wetland vegetation. Allow it to become a wetland, plant it with attractive plants that look nice, a healthy wetland. So that'll compete for space, it'll compete for light, it'll compete for nutrients. It will reduce the risk of having a harmful algal bloom that could potentially kill the local pets.
Is that by ingestion, then it's toxic?
Yes, so if we're talking about, some of them produce skin toxins, which are rather trivial, right? The worst you can expect of a skin toxin is you'll get a rash if you have a particular bad allergic reaction. But yes, ingestion would be required to have acute poisoning effects, for example. A person is very good at keeping yucky looking water out of their mouths, right? So they see a situation like this and they're going to clam up and not wipe, to get their hands wet and wipe their nose, which is a way you could ingest it, right? But a dog, for example, dog walking along, dog runs into the pond, or maybe an owner throws a ball into the pond, the dog chases it. Dog goes into the pond, comes out of the pond, the water runs off the fur. All of those little colonies of microcystis are clinging to the fur and becoming very much more concentrated in having all that water run away and leave the microcystis there. So then as the dog is grooming itself, it is ingesting very high concentrations of potentially toxic substances. And this stuff very commonly kills dogs. Right? That said, if you're in a situation, for example, where you have a fountain, this stuff can aerosolize. It doesn't volatilize, it doesn't become a gas, but the toxins can be in water droplets. Right? So if you are inhaling water droplets, you are potentially ingesting toxins. I don't think that will be a big issue here, but it's at least a possibility. Right? So I might argue that for this pond, well, you either decide to commit to a very substantial dredge operation, which will cost a lot of money in order to regain its function as a pond, or allow it to become a wetland and plant it with wetland plants that the public will think are attractive. Wetlands, some people complain that wetlands have the potential to produce mosquitoes, but a healthy wetland that maintains connectivity of permanent water will have predators that very largely reduce the presence of mosquitoes. Right? So you want wetlands that have a diversity of depth and that all of the pools are connected to each other so predators can freely move around. If you have isolated, stagnant backwaters, those are the things that produce mosquitoes.
What is the cost to dredge a pond like the Township Hall one?
So it varies a lot, and it varies a lot on what contractors are doing that work and by region. I can only speculate because I have no idea what the volume of material that you have in this pond is. I have no idea if we're talking about how many cubic yards of silt you'd have to remove. But I think realistically, you could expect it to be easily into the tens of thousands of dollars, probably $50,000 or more, and frankly, probably more than $100,000. And a lot
Just for that one pond?
Yes, and a lot would depend too. So there are different approaches to dredging. There's something called a suction dredge, which in essence vacuums silt out of the bottom of the pond through a trash pump. And there is where you actually drain water and bring in heavy equipment and move earth.
But it needs to be deeper regardless, or the same problem is going to happen all over again?
It depends. So if you try to maintain open water there, that open water is only going to be problematic. If you don't try to maintain open water, allow it to go to a marsh, you can aggressively plant it and not really try to regain depth.
But if you want to keep it as a pond, you would need to, okay.
Yeah, so if you want it maintained as an open water pond, you really need to regain depth for it to function as a
Do
pond.
you have it dug out, or do you know how deep that pond is?
No idea, because
I couldn't get out there.
I couldn't float a boat on it. It was just too dense with algae, and frankly, I'm not sure I want to go floating around in my preciousness.
So it's possible that pond is not even deep enough to be healthy, even if it is dredged out.
Well, if you dredge it, the dredging is removing enough sediment that you regain depth.
So you
make
can
it
actually
deep.
make it deeper,
Oh, yeah.
not just remove the
Exactly.
excess that's built up. Okay.
If I could, is it still a requirement that when you dredge, you have to leave the spoils on site until they dry out and then they're taken to somewhere to be,
So yes,
disposed of?
yeah, you need to dispose of the dredge material, but most contractors who do that kind of work have the mechanism to deal with it.
So they
that's
have a
going to be
site where
part
they
of
can
the
take
bid.
it.
Exactly.
So it's part of there and that's all.
And very often, for example, with a suction dredge operation, they'll have these great big silk bags on site that they just pump full of your dredge material, and as the water runs off, and they tow those away to whatever the
So that the spoils don't have to remain on site?
Not necessarily, but you do have to have the capacity to dispose of it, which is usually dealt with by contractors.
So we should probably put some kind of sign up in the meantime while we're deciding that people
I
should
believe
not
Bill
drink the
already
water.
has some signs up. So I shared
Are
some
they
example signs that the state has used on
Yeah.
reservoirs that are problematic, and I think he's posted some.
Yeah, I
So,
saw
I
that
mean, certainly
email.
you want to minimize your own liability, right? Because if you know this is a problem and somebody's dog dies,
Sure.
then you become liable.
Well, plus we don't want dogs to die, so.
Exactly.
What's involved in turning it into a wetland and about how much would that cost?
I have no idea how much that would cost. It would depend again on the contractor you use. There are several consulting firms that would do that kind of work, but it would be very substantially less money, I think, than a dredge operation to regain the pond. And it's the kind of thing that with advice, you could probably have your own staff do if they have the time to do it, although it's rather specialized, right? So it would mostly involve aggressively planting vegetation in order to provide competition against problem organisms.
I think it's worth getting some quotes on
Yeah,
dredging.
I do. Yeah, that's
So-
that pond is a
That's a
special
jewel.
feature. Yeah, it is a jewel of Township. So what?
That said, though, I mean, don't be too belittling of a marsh. A quality marsh, I think, is a fantastic. It's great for wildlife. It's frankly better for wildlife than a pond is. And look up plants, for example, like pickerelweed, like cardinal flower, which is a very intensely red lobelia. These are all native wetland plants that are super attractive.
Is there wetlands around here we could take a look at if we
So there's
real,
one
real
in,
actual wetlands?
a good friend of mine runs a consulting firm that does wetland renovation. I asked this very same question because Minerva Park is battling the same problem right now. I'm thinking about turning one of their ponds in series into a marsh. And he referred me to a site in Westerville that he restored. So if you'd like, I can share where that site is, and you can drive out and have a look.
What is the site? You don't know?
Not off the top
Not
of my
in
head.
this-
He
in
gave me
this-
an exact location. It's
He
in an
did?
email,
Exact, okay.
and I don't have all of the email.
It wouldn't hurt to look at it, but
Yeah.
I do think that at this point. So what do we need to do for the Township Hall or the or North Orange Pond?
That pond I would simply dredge to a functional depth. Certainly the lower pond, so if you're going to prioritize, I would do so in the lower pond to maintain the lower pond as a pond, and then you can consider doing that for the upper pond, or you can consider just sacrificing the upper pond to function as a forebay, right? Which would, in essence, allow the upper pond to be more marshy, but again, pushing the competition in a direction you like rather than having nuisance things.
And did you look at the pond out here at all? The one that's on the corner? He didn't look at that one. That one's fine, right?
That was a big one we drove to the first time we were there.
Okay, so I drove by that one. That I did not float on that, so I can't tell you anything about the water column itself. It looks like a good pond, a rather healthy pond. The most problematic issue I saw that was a handful of invasive species creeping in around the margin of the pond that I would rather see gone.
Okay. And you told Bill about those?
I did indeed.
Okay. Good.
How long is the process to dredge a pond?
It's extremely variable. The suction dredge process can go pretty quickly if you've got a small volume, but it all depends on the volume that you have. And I have no way to estimate that. You have to have a contractor come out and and take some cores.
So we should get some quotes. We could get some quotes, okay.
Do you run into this, is this kind of common, because like we have a pond in our development that's had the same issues with depth.
Absolutely.
It's very common.
So this is a big part of what I do, right? Sometimes I'm out in the country looking at a borrowed pond that's 100 years old and functionally young. Sometimes I'm in the city of Toledo looking at a pond that's 10 years old and functionally extremely old, right? So it all depends on the watershed.
I think that when, a lot of times when developers dig the pond, they don't really give consideration to a lot of those issues because they won't be around when, you know, when the problems start 10 years, 5, 10 years.
You know, that's an argument I make all the time. Developers usually develop to meet the minimum requirement of the law, right? And they put in a pond and new residents see this young pond and think, this is beautiful, I want my house there. And if it's not engineered correctly,
Yeah.
in 10 years, it's a
10
very
years later.
old pond that is full of green filth and smells bad and covered with goose turds. So, you know, it's.
Maybe
yes.
we need to add something to our zoning language for that. Right.
Just a quick question. North Orange Park, do you remember what the depths were when you were doing your lot?
So Mike wrote those down and he hasn't sent them to me. So in general, I would say that the lower pond, we struggled to find points that were 7 feet deep. In the upper pond, we struggled to find points that were 6 feet.
So it's not too bad.
Not too bad, no. But, so if you want it to be a stormwater pond that is not quality habitat for fish, it can do that for a while. If you want it to be quality habitat for fish, it should be addressed pretty soon.
One more, if you don't mind.
Not at all.
The dam out here, I don't know if you could speak to that, with the trees and things.
Okay, so this, I don't know how old this pond is, but I suspect it's very old. When you build, there are lots of different ways to make a pond, and the common way is if you've got a sloped landscape that you can take advantage of, you build a dam around the lower part of the slope to hold water against the shallow part of the slope. In a modern build, what you'll do is you'll cut a trench there. You'll fill that with especially like a clay that's likely able to hold water and compact that into the trench, and then you'll mound earth up there and compact that clay around that earth, then add more earth on top of that compacted core, deliberately engineered to hold water. And that's what's typically done. If you have a dam like that, that dam is going to be relatively narrow, right? But it's got engineered core that is very important to preserve the integrity of that engineered core, which means you keep wood off of it. Because if you've got wood that has roots that are seeking water and they violate the integrity of that by putting roots through that engineered core, you risk catastrophic failure. I don't think this dam is built that way, but I don't know. I think it's a very old dam and it's very, very wide, right? So it looks like they just, in essence, mounded enough earth that it's going to slow the flow of water through it, that it will hold water. It could be expected to hold water for a long time. But there are trees growing on it, right? So if you have that engineered core, that's a very serious concern. I don't know that you do. In general, though, no wood on dams.
Lots of trees on the dam. And the roots just become conduit for the water.
Yeah, right.
Right.
Definitely.
Well, thanks for all your information. I really appreciate it. You're quite the expert at ponds.
Thank you.
So are we in agreement to move forward with some quotes then?
Yeah.
And you're welcome to always, I'm already paid for it, right? So as I consult, the state's already paid my salary, so ask me anything.
Oh, great. Yeah. Is your contact information in the email, right, Lee?
Yes.
Is that correct?
Bill
Okay.
has it, and I also
Yeah.
brought a handful of literature that you're welcome to do with as you see fit, but things that are relevant to what I'm saying today.
Well, I was just mentioning, we might want to put some standards in our zoning resolution possibly for new ponds, even though I know we don't have a lot of area left to zone, but we still have issues with like almost all the ponds in any of our developments. We could maybe put some standards in like that.
And one of the documents I shared with Bill is the state stormwater management handbook is almost 500 pages long, but I've excerpted about 40-some pages that are specifically about pond management and engineering ponds for those kinds of stormwater function. I sent that document, so that excerpted document to Bill, and he can share it.
Okay, yeah,
Jeff, we might want to have Michelle look at that also.
yeah, might be something, because I know it goes hand in hand with, we have county engineer has certain requirements for things, but I know a lot of times we go through zonings and people get really excited about ponds and things, but
And when they're young, they look fantastic.
Yeah.
But then if you allow them to become old, they become
Like
a
they
liability.
always do. People always want to get rid of their ponds. So yeah, well, thanks for coming in, and I'm sure we'll have more questions for you.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you.
Stay in touch if I can be of service.
Thank you very much.
Certainly.
I make the motion the board go to executive session to consider confidential information directly related to negotiations with other political subdivisions respecting requests for economic development assistance that is to be provided for administered under chapter 715 of the Ohio Revised Code, and the board determines executive session is necessary to protect the interest of the applicants or the possible investment or to ensure public funds made in connection with the economic development project, and also the conference with an attorney regarding pending immediate litigation.
Second?
Mr. Rivers?
Yes.
Ms. Knapp?
Yes.
Mr. Taranto?
Yes.
And invited to attend are Mr. Lamb, Mr. McCarthy, Mr. Bodnar, and I saw Mr. Ironman's here. I don't know if he'll be needed, but we'll add him to the list in case there's questions. Yes.